After years of living under our HOA's iron fist, they finally crossed the line by raising my fees over something as ridiculous as having too many cars in my own driveway. What they didn't realize was that I had been quietly buying up properties in this community for years. And now it was time to show Linda, our power-hungry HOA president, who really owned this neighborhood. But would she accept defeat gracefully once I revealed my secret? I never set out to cause trouble with the HOA. I honestly didn't. But when I found that bright orange notice taped to my front door last Tuesday morning, I knew this was war. My hands shook as I read it. Immediate HOA fee increase, $500 monthly violation. Reason, excessive vehicles on property. 3 cars. That's what this was about. My work truck, which I rely on for my construction business. My wife Emily's SUV, which she needs for her late-night shifts at the hospital. And the used Toyota we had just bought for our daughter's 16th birthday last month. 3 perfectly normal cars in our own driveway. From my kitchen window, I watched Linda Crawford, our HOA president, doing her morning inspection walk with her little clipboard and measuring tape. She stopped at my driveway, pulled out her phone, and started taking pictures again. This was the 3rd time this week. "Honey, she's out there again," Emily called from the living room. "Maybe we should just park the Toyota in the garage." "No," I said firmly, pouring my coffee. "We're not hiding our daughter's car like we've done something wrong. The garage is full of your medical supplies and my work equipment, exactly like we explained at the last HOA meeting." I couldn't stop thinking about that meeting. Linda had smirked while I tried to explain our situation. "Rules are rules, Mr. Reynolds," she'd said, not even looking up from her phone. "Maybe if you can't afford proper garage storage, this neighborhood isn't for you." What Linda didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had been quietly buying up homes in this development for the past 5 years through my real estate company. Every time a house went up for sale, I made sure to purchase it under a different LLC. What started as a smart investment strategy had now become something more. I walked outside to grab the mail, deliberately taking my time. Linda pretended to inspect Mrs. Green's rose bushes while keeping one eye on me. Poor Mrs. Green had been fined last month for having roses that were too bright and disrupting the neighborhood's color harmony. My phone buzzed. A text from my lawyer. "Property closing complete. You now own 67% of the development." I smiled and slipped my phone back in my pocket just as Linda power walked toward me, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Mr. Reynolds," she called out, her voice dripping with false sweetness, "I trust you received our notice about the vehicle violation?" "I did, Linda," I replied calmly, "and I have some questions about the legal basis for this fee increase." She waved her hand dismissively. "The board has full authority to implement fees as needed. Perhaps if you attended more meetings, you'd understand how these things work." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. What she didn't realize was that I had, in fact, attended every single meeting for the past 5 years through proxy representatives who technically owned the properties I controlled. And I had documented everything: her selective enforcement, her questionable fees, her repeated abuses of power. As she turned to leave, her designer heels clicking sharply against the sidewalk, she called over her shoulder, "Oh, and the board is calling an emergency meeting tonight at 7 p.m. sharp. We'll be discussing additional measures for problem properties." I watched her walk away, then pulled out my phone and texted my lawyer. Time to prepare the documents. She's making her move tonight. Just then, my daughter's car pulled into the driveway. I saw Linda pause and snap another round of photos. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to stay calm. Tonight would change everything. Back inside, I spread out property maps across my desk, each lot carefully highlighted and coded. 5 years of preparation, 5 years of watching Linda's reign of HOA terror grow worse. Tonight, she would finally realize her biggest mistake wasn't just targeting my family. It was underestimating exactly who she was dealing with. The phone rang. It was Mrs. Green from across the street crying about another violation notice. As I listened to her, my eyes fell on the framed photo hanging on my wall. My father standing proudly in front of his first home before an HOA's harassment had forced him to sell at a loss 20 years ago. He had taught me to play the long game, to fight smart instead of angry. I checked my watch. 6 hours until the meeting. Linda wanted to play hardball over a few cars in a driveway. She had no idea what was coming. I had known for years how these meetings went. Neighbors sitting shoulder to shoulder, whispering among themselves. But Linda had really outdone herself this time. She'd even hired a professional photographer to take pictures of my driveway from different angles, making 3 normal-sized cars look like some sort of illegal parking lot. "Let's begin," Linda announced, tapping her sparkly pink gavel on the podium. She had called this emergency meeting on a Tuesday evening, fully aware that most working families would struggle to attend. But I had made sure to be there, sitting quietly in the back row, watching her put on her usual show. "As you can see from these professional photographs," she began, clicking through her PowerPoint presentation, "Mr. Reynolds' property has become a used car lot." A few gasps came from her loyal followers in the front row, the same ones whose Christmas decorations stayed up until March without a single fine. I glanced around the room. Mrs. Green, my elderly neighbor, rolled her eyes. She'd been fined last month for having her grandson's car in her driveway while he helped repair her roof. Mr. Chen, the high school science teacher, was furiously taking notes. He'd received a violation notice for parking his car slightly over his driveway line during the last snowstorm. Linda clicked to the next slide, showing a zoomed-in photo of my daughter's Toyota. "This vehicle has been parked in the same spot for over 48 hours, she declared. She failed to mention that it was because my daughter had been home from college for the weekend. The meeting dragged on as Linda presented her so-called evidence. Charts showing supposed property value decreases, complaints from anonymous neighbors, probably her friends, and even weather reports claiming my cars created excess snowdrifts on the street. Furthermore, she continued, pulling out a thick binder, I've documented every instance of vehicles entering and leaving Mr. Reynolds' property over the past 3 months. My eyebrows shot up. She had been tracking my family's movements. Several neighbors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. That's when Emily Jenkins, my next-door neighbor, stood up. Linda, isn't this a bit excessive? They're just regular cars in a regular driveway. Linda's face reddened. She snapped, You're out of order. You have not been recognized by the chair.
I watched as Linda's husband, Bob, began handing out copies of a newly proposed bylaw, one that would limit each household to 2 vehicles and require garage parking only. The absurdity of it all almost made me laugh. Almost. "We'll now vote on the new vehicle restrictions and fee increase," Linda declared, not even bothering to allow discussion. "All in favor?" That was my cue. I stood up slowly, straightening my tie. "Point of order, Madam President." Linda's eyes narrowed as she looked at me over her reading glasses. "You are not recognized, Mr. Reynolds." "Actually," I said, pulling out my own folder, "according to HOA Bylaw Section 73, any property owner may raise a point of order regarding voting procedures." The room fell silent. I could see Linda's perfectly manicured nails gripping the podium tighter. "Before we vote, I believe it's important to review the HOA's current property ownership structure." I began walking toward the front of the room, my shoes clicking on the linoleum floor. You see, over the past 5 years, Sunrise Properties has been acquiring homes in this development. Linda's face started to lose its color as I pulled out a large property map. And as CEO of Sunrise Properties, I thought it might interest everyone to know exactly who owns the majority of this HOA. I paused, making deliberate eye contact with each board member. "But perhaps we should also discuss the questionable surveillance activities you've been conducting." The room erupted in murmurs. Phones came out. Neighbors began recording every moment. Linda's hand trembled as she reached for her water bottle, knocking her precious gavel off the podium in the process. Bob rushed up, whispering something urgently in her ear. Her eyes widened as she finally realized who she had been dealing with all these years. The meeting room fell silent. My heart was pounding, but my voice stayed steady. Linda's smug smile faded as I pulled out my leather briefcase. "Before we vote on these new fees," I said, "I have something important to share with everyone." I clicked open the briefcase and removed a thick stack of property deeds, laying them one by one on the table. Each paper represented another piece of my long-term plan coming together. The room buzzed with whispers as I arranged them in neat rows. "For the past 5 years," I continued, "I've watched this HOA board ignore serious maintenance issues while harassing good neighbors over the smallest things. I've seen Linda here write up Mrs. Green, who is 82 years old, for having a flower pot that was 1 inch too tall. Meanwhile, her friend Susan's bright purple fence never received a single warning." Linda's face flushed crimson. "That's not true. I enforce all rules fairly," she snapped. But her hand was shaking so badly she spilled water down the front of her designer blouse.
I pulled up photos on the meeting room's big screen. "Here's Linda measuring my grass at 3 o'clock in the morning last Tuesday," I said. The security camera footage was crystal clear. Several people gasped. "And here she is ignoring the Reynolds violations completely, right after they hired her son's landscaping company." More whispers filled the room. I could see neighbors starting to nod, remembering their own run-ins with Linda's selective enforcement. "But the most interesting thing I discovered," I continued, picking up the stack of deeds, "is that through my company, Sunrise Properties, I now own 67% of the homes in this development." I paused, letting the meaning sink in. That makes me the majority owner of the HOA itself. Linda jumped up, knocking over her chair. "You can't do that! It's not allowed!" Her voice went squeaky with panic. I smiled calmly. "Actually, I can. I've had 3 different law firms review everything. It's completely legal." I pulled out another folder. I also have signed complaints from 32 residents about harassment, selective enforcement, and suspicious fees. The room erupted. Mrs. Green stood up, her voice trembling with emotion. "Last winter, they fined me $200 for not shoveling my walkway fast enough. I was in the hospital with pneumonia." Others joined in, sharing their stories. Linda banged her gavel desperately, but nobody was listening to her anymore. "I move to dissolve the current board," I announced. "We'll hold new elections with term limits and clear rules about conflict of interest. No more 3 a.m. grass measuring. No more selective enforcement." Mr. Chen from 2 doors down raised his hand. "I second that motion." Soon, hands were going up all around the room. Linda grabbed her designer purse and started toward the door. "This meeting is adjourned," she yelled. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer." "Actually," I said, still calm, "according to HOA bylaws section 7.3, you need a majority vote to adjourn, and I don't think you have that anymore." I gestured at the deed spread across the table. "We're just getting started." She froze with her hand on the doorknob, realizing her power was slipping away. 20 years of ruling the neighborhood with an iron fist were coming to an end. "Now," I continued, opening another folder, "let's talk about those mysterious pool renovation fees from last summer. The ones where $50,000 disappeared, but the pool never got fixed. I have some interesting bank records to share." Linda slumped against the wall, her face pale. She hadn't noticed yet, but a local news van had just pulled into the parking lot. I'd invited them to cover our community reorganization meeting. The next few hours would change our neighborhood forever. But first, we had years of Linda's secrets to uncover. And I had every single receipt. My careful planning was finally paying off, and the best part was still to come. The following Monday morning, I walked into my lawyer's office to find 20 angry voicemails from Linda. She had discovered my company's property records over the weekend and was threatening to sue me for secretly taking over the neighborhood. I couldn't help but smile. She had finally shown her true colors. But Linda wasn't just angry, she was scared. That evening, she went door to door spreading rumors that I was planning to turn our peaceful suburb into a parking lot for my car collection. Some neighbors actually believed her, especially after she waved around fake documents suggesting I had ties to a shady development company. I knew I had to act fast. My security cameras caught Linda sneaking onto my property at midnight, snapping close-up photos of my car's license plates. The next day, she filed a lawsuit claiming I had broken HOA rules by buying properties through my company. She even tried to get an emergency court order to freeze my voting rights in the HOA. That's when my months of careful planning truly paid off. My lawyer revealed our secret weapon, a detailed record of every HOA meeting for the past 5 years. We had videos showing Linda giving her friends passes on their violations while hammering others with fines. We had copies of checks proving she had used HOA funds to renovate her own backyard. Best of all, we had emails where she bragged about using her power to keep undesirable elements out of the neighborhood. The judge's eyes widened with each new piece of evidence. Linda's face turned red when we showed time-stamped footage of her measuring my grass with a ruler at 3 a.m., taking photos of my daughter's Toyota, and leaving threatening notes on neighbors' doors. Her lawyer began to sweat when we presented proof that she had altered HOA records to hide her friends' unpaid dues. But the real shock came when 3 former board members stepped forward. They testified that Linda had bullied them into approving unfair rules, admitted to targeting specific homeowners she didn't like, and even bragged about using HOA fines to fund her yearly trips to Hawaii. The courtroom grew silent when we projected Linda's social media posts, her mocking comments about elderly residents who couldn't afford their HOA fees. There she was, poolside in Maui, posting, "Thanks to all my rule-breaking neighbors for funding this trip."
This vacation kept those violations coming. Linda tried to defend herself, claiming she was just doing her job. But then we played the recording from last month's HOA meeting where she had screamed at Mrs. Green, our 75-year-old neighbor, for having a bird feeder that was 2 inches too low. That's when Linda finally lost it. She jumped up from her seat, pointing her finger at me. "He's trying to destroy our perfect neighborhood," she shouted. "Do you know what kind of people will move in if we don't have strict rules? He probably wants to turn this into one of those communities where people can park wherever they want." The judge had heard enough. He not only dismissed Linda's lawsuit, but ordered a full audit of the HOA's finances. As we left the courthouse, my phone started buzzing with texts from neighbors. They had all received a mass email from Linda announcing her immediate resignation from the board and claiming she was being forced out by big money interests. I watched her storm to her car, already typing furiously on her phone. I knew this wasn't over. Linda still had loyal followers in the neighborhood, and she wasn't the type to admit defeat easily. But for now, I had what I needed. Proof that our HOA president had been abusing her power for years, and the legal authority to make real changes. The morning of the final court hearing started with a surprise. Linda had sent an army of news vans to my house. She thought public pressure would make me back down, but she had just given me the perfect stage. I straightened my tie, grabbed my documents, and walked right up to the reporters with a smile. "Good morning, everyone. I'm James Reynolds, and I'd love to show you something interesting about our HOA's financial records." I pulled out the color-coded spreadsheets my accountant had prepared, showing years of suspicious fees that always seemed to end up funding projects for Linda's closest friends. The reporter's eyes lit up as I explained how Linda had charged single parents higher violation fees than her golf buddies. One reporter gasped when I showed security footage of Linda measuring my lawn at 3 a.m. while her own yard violated every rule in the book. Inside the courthouse, Linda sat with her expensive lawyer, wearing her signature fake pearl necklace and a smug smile. That smile vanished when our attorney began presenting evidence. We showed photos of Linda's own house breaking rules, her bright purple mailbox, her overgrown garden, and her son's 4 cars parked on the street. The judge leaned forward when we revealed Linda's secret Facebook group where she bragged about targeting certain families. "Let's see how long the Reynoldses last with these new fees," she had written. "Maybe they'll finally move and sell to someone more suitable." Linda jumped up to object, but froze when we played the recording from last week's pool party. Her voice rang out clearly through the courtroom. "Of course I make up violations. How else can we keep control of who lives here?" The judge's gavel came down hard. Not only was Linda removed from the HOA board, but she was also ordered to repay every unfair fee she had collected. The look on her face when she heard the total, $147,892, was better than any revenge I could have planned. I used my majority ownership to create a new HOA board with a difference. We elected 5 residents from different parts of the neighborhood, including Mrs. Rodriguez, whom Linda had tried to find for cooking ethnic food, and Mr. Chan, whose beautiful garden Linda once called too exotic. The changes came fast. Kids could now play basketball in their driveways. Gardens could grow vegetables, not just flowers. And yes, families could park more than 2 cars, as long as they fit in their own space. 3 weeks later, I watched through my window as Linda's moving truck pulled up. She had sent a final letter to everyone, claiming she was moving to a better neighborhood with higher standards. Nobody missed the irony when her new HOA had already slapped a parking ticket on her windshield as she drove away. That evening, my daughter parked her Toyota in our driveway, right next to my work truck and Emily's SUV. I put up a small sign we had all voted on. "Welcome to Reynolds Hills, where good neighbors make good neighborhoods." The next morning, I got an unexpected call. A TV producer had seen the news coverage and wanted to make a documentary about how we had transformed our HOA. As I looked out at kids playing freely in their yards and neighbors chatting over garden fences, I smiled, thinking about Linda watching it from her new house with its 1-car garage rule. The best part? Our property values went up 15% in the first month after Linda left. Turns out, people really do prefer living in a neighborhood where they're treated with respect instead of ruled by fear. Some of Linda's old friends even stopped by to apologize, admitting they had only supported her because they were afraid of becoming her next target. We still have an HOA, but now it protects the neighborhood instead of policing it. Every month,
We use the fees for things that actually matter, improving the playground, fixing the pool, helping elderly residents maintain their homes. We even started a community garden in the very spot where Linda used to take her yard violation photos. As I filed away the last of the court documents, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from Linda's new neighborhood watch group. They were asking for advice about dealing with their own power-hungry HOA president. I leaned back in my chair, thinking that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's showing others how to stand up for themselves.